Well, hello everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Suchit Bachalli, CEO of Unilog, and I'm excited to welcome today's guest. I've known Andy for a very long time, maybe over 10 years. Andy Hoar is the founder and CEO of Paradigm B2B and widely recognized as one of the leading analysts and thought leaders in B2B e-commerce. He's a creator of the Paradigm B2B Combine, an evaluation that has quickly become a trusted benchmark for technology providers and the industry, the B2B industry at large. I've followed your work for a long time, Andy, and I'm thrilled to have this opportunity to sit down with you and talk about the origins of the Combine, what makes it different from the other analyst frameworks, and maybe also touch on the trends that are shaping the future of B2B. We at Unilog are obviously very invested in this space, have been involved in B2B commerce for many, many years, as you well know. But thank you for joining and welcome.
Yeah, great to be here. Can't wait to knock it around, talk about a few trends that are taking place, and dig into it.
Awesome. Let me maybe start where I always like to start, which is understanding the why. You've been an analyst for a long time, covered many industry segments, and I have known you from your time with prior research organizations. What prompted the setting up and the sort of the origins of your company, Paradigm B2B, and then creating the Combine?
Yeah, so first, the company, I just felt like there was an underserved market around, in particular, mid-market B2B distributors and manufacturers. I worked at Forrester. Forrester was great. I loved my time there. But Forrester and Gartner and IDC really served the enterprise space. And what I saw was that nobody was really serving, the $50 to $500 million regional distributor or, brand manufacturer who makes a coupling or a capacitor or something like that. And it just felt like, these people have the same problems that the enterprises have. They may not have the same size budget, although I would dispute that a little bit. Some of the smaller companies have pretty decent budgets for these things. And some of the larger companies, as you know, don't have the budget they seem to have. So I just wanted to serve that market, and there really was nothing out there. So stepped away in 2017 to pursue that. And along the way, I also sort of realized that the Forrester, Gartner, IDC model looked very familiar and very similar to me for evaluating technology platforms. It's the classic sort of 2x2 box, right? The consultant 2x2. They all have some version of that. And when I was at Forrester, what frustrated me about that 2x2 box is that I call it the leader loser metaphor. There's only one box, one quadrant everybody wants to be in, and it's that upper right-hand quadrant. And anything other than that, and you're considered, I hate to use the term a loser. I mean, I don't mean that literally, but every company I would talk to that was evaluating technology, what they would tell me is we only look at the companies with very rare exception. We only look at the companies in the leader quadrant because they use that as validation to go to their senior people. And they said, well, they were a leader in the Gartner Magic Quadrant. They were a leader in the Forrester Wave. They were a leader, whatever it's called, with the IDC MarketScape. And I thought, that's interesting, but I think it under tells the story. And in particular, one thing, I liken that to evaluating decathletes. I'm a big sports fan.
Yeah.
If you look at how the Olympics are structured, you know this. There's always the decathlete who's considered the world's best athlete, but that person isn't the best in the world at anything. Pretty fast, pretty strong, can throw a javelin pretty far, but they wouldn't hold a candle to the world champions in each of the areas. So what I wanted to do was to establish a metaphor where I could look for the world champions in each of these areas, because what I found, and I think we've had conversations about this before, and I think probably what you found too, is that sometimes manufacturers and distributors don't want all of those things, and they certainly aren't willing to pay for all of those things. So perhaps they want a company with a strong PIM, a really robust shopping cart, and a strong partner network. And those are the only three things they care about. Well, if you go to the Magic Quadrant or the Wave, they're going to evaluate somebody across 12, 15 different categories and merge all those together into one composite score. So I used to say when I was at Forrester, and I mean nothing derogatory about this, but I called it the IBM problem, the IBM WebSphere problem. IBM WebSphere was pretty good at many things, but not great at anything. And yet it was always in our leader quadrant.
Right.
And so I think, well, aren't there companies that are great in certain areas? And how are they being evaluated? Or are they getting dragged down because they don't have all the functionality across 12, 15 areas, and their composite score doesn't reflect their capability? So that was the idea. I invented the combine after the sports metaphor. Every sport has a combine where they evaluate and assess the skills. And so I'm in my, I want to say, 6th or 7th year of having done that. And I know you guys have been a part of this before. And I think it's surfaced companies that really excel in certain areas and don't have necessarily all the functionality that people don't necessarily want.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, that's been our experience as well. As you know, we are laser focused in the mid market, and we always found that the needs of the mid market are very nuanced and very different. And going back to your comment about budgets and how $100 million company spends versus a enterprise level, $10 billion company, I sometimes end up having a lot more respect for the small to mid-sized business that stretches their budget and their dollar to go after something that means a lot to them. And so in this market that sort of we inhabit in the mid-market, I think it's very important to really understand what the motivations are and how important that return on investment is. And I think the combine does a really good job from a vendor perspective, right? It does a really good job of saying, here are things that these companies are really good at. And we look at our competitors as well, and I have a lot of respect for what they do, and there are competitors that are killing it with large partner networks or with really good search, for example, and someone else is doing something really cool on the cart side of things. And it's really, even from a vendor perspective, you don't get boxed in, and I think it really helps us look at the market and look at ourselves from a very pragmatic perspective. So I do sort of echo that sentiment that A, it was much needed. B, it's a market that was heavily underserved, and I'm glad we've been part of it now for almost since the time you started out. So it's been great to see it evolve over time. Let me ask you a sort of corollary to that. What really goes into your evaluation framework, if I can put it that way? How do you sort of evaluate technology um, from not just from the sort of functionality perspective and checking boxes, but how do you we've had many conversations, but I found that the framework is really interesting, and you dig deep in certain areas. Your demo scripts are very unique. But for the audience, I think it would be great for them to hear how you're really thinking about evaluating the participants in the combine.
Yeah, I think the most important thing is I don't believe in a checklist. And what I mean by that is I don't believe in just sending a vendor a list and saying, tell me whether you do these things or not. The reason why is because it doesn't go to the proportionality or the strength with which they do these things. If you give I'm sure you guys are not like this, but if you were to give a vendor a checklist and say, do you do A through Z? Guess what? They're going to check A through Z, whether
Yeah.
they do it a little bit or they're world class. And so what does that really give you? It gives you a whole lot of nothing. So what I believe in is you mentioned the demo scripts. I do ask people for functionality. I want to know what functionality is actually included in there, but I don't trust it. I don't use it to evaluate how good that functionality is. Well, for that, I do customer references, extensive customer references. I do between 80 and 100 customer reference calls for a typical combine. And so I'm talking to quite a few people, and they're not like 5-minute phone calls, like hi, bye kind of. I don't do it by email either. I've had a few times when I've been forced to do it, but I always follow up with a phone call. I want to talk to the people mostly by Zoom because I don't think you can just say, hey, what are the strengths? What are the weaknesses? First of all, you don't know that they're not just feeding this to you from someplace else. I want to look in their eyes. I want to understand what's actually happening and follow up with a question. So I believe heavily in the customer reference component. And then the demo scripts. So to me, I always use the analogy of it's like a word problem in math. Somebody
Yeah,
can guess a number, right? Word problem, you have to interpret it and you have to come back with an assessment. And what I like about the demo scripts is that when somebody says, for example, oh yeah, sir, we offer site search capability. They check the list for that. And then I give them a scenario where they have to demonstrate how strong the site search capability is. And that's when it all either shines or crumbles. And I've seen it go both ways. I've seen people who sort of undertell their story. And when they show me the demo, I'm like, I didn't know you could do all that. Wow, that's
yeah,
amazing. More often it's sure we have really robust, world-class, fill in your blank for rhetoric, site search capability. And then I give them a very simple demo script that asks them to do, show me your semantic capability or show me how you handle synonyms, for example. And they
yeah,
can't do it. And so I was like, wait a minute, you said you had site search capability. This doesn't even meet the minimum qualification. So I guess the proving ground are the demo scripts. But I give people another chance too. So to me, it's like, show me what you do, put it in a spreadsheet. I'm going to talk to customer references and I'm going to have demo scripts. And I talk to partners, by the way. People don't know this, but I know all the SIs. I
right.
go to them and say, okay, here's what these companies are telling me. What's the reality in the market? And I always joke with people, I've been doing this for so long. I'm like, don't lie to me. I'm just going to find out about it. And when I do, I'm just going to get upset about it. I'm going to be pissed off at you. And so it's true. If you tell me you do this and I find out later you don't do this, how do they think that's going to work? I just
Yeah,
think they have to believe me. And it's true that I do know enough people that I will get to the answer here. So it's like the detective says, if you lie to me now, it's going to be a lot worse for you in court.
yeah. That is very true. But thanks for sharing that. But kind of, it's good for me to sort of sit here and peel the layers a little bit and really get insight into your process. That number blows my mind. 80 to 100 phone calls. That's and you've always done it within that time frame. It's always held to
I
those
do
calls.
them myself. Sorry,
What?
I do it myself. I don't have I don't have a research assistant do it. I don't believe in that either. I should have mentioned that. I do the calls, the Zoom calls myself. First of all, I think it's respectful toward the person who's spending time. In some cases, these are very senior executives who are giving their time freely to do this. I just can't imagine pawning them off on a 22-year-old, very nice and well-meaning research assistant who doesn't really know anything about anything, was handed this as a task. I feel like I do the phone call. I need to do the phone call. And it takes a certain level of skill to know how to follow up a comment. Sometimes, the call doesn't seem to be going anywhere. Then I ask sort of an oddball kind of question. And I know enough to know that when they answer a certain way, that's an opportunity for me to dig deeper. And some of the
Yeah.
best phone calls I've ever had are those where it's very kind of perfunctory. There's nothing really new. And I throw in a question like one of my favorite questions is if you had to say one thing that you would change about it, just one, what it would be. Because I oftentimes have people tell me, I can't say anything bad about it. These guys are great. I'd highly recommend them. Like, if you had to point to just one thing, there's always one thing. Nobody's perfect, right? And then 30 minutes later, I get this whole recitation about, well, they don't do this, they don't do that. Come to think of it, it doesn't include this capability. I know how to ask that question. I know how to interpret the answers. Sadly, I don't think a junior person does.
Yeah, that's a lot of effort, and I think it helps because it makes me want to take this conversation for just a minute in a slightly different way. I know we're going to talk a lot about AI today, but just in your industry and research in general, I want to have a follow-up question on that. But before I go, I think it's that kind of experience and having those kinds of conversations. You're absolutely right. I think when we send in a list of our customers, I mean, we're asking them for a favor, right? We're saying, hey, can you take some time off of your busy day or week and spend time with Andy. And when they report back and say, I had a great conversation with Andy. Not only did we talk about you guys, but we also spent 10 minutes talking about other things, which was, valuable. I think that makes for good research. And so my question to you follow up was, I know everyone's talking about AI. We certainly are. We're doing things, we're building agents and all of that. But research as an industry, right? There's obviously the Gartners and the Forresters of the world, but research as an industry is going to change. It's going to evolve because there's so much out there now in terms of, if I wanted to ask a question, there are other tools that have scoured the internet and become intelligent, and I can ask the question of a GPT or some sort of AI engine. What are your thoughts on how AI is going to impact the research industry in general? And I don't know if you've sort of formulated your thoughts around that.
Not formally, but I've certainly had a lot of conversations about it. So, from my perspective, AI is very smart, but it's not necessarily wise. And there are some limits to what it knows. So, to me, use it for where it's strong and then complement it for where it's weak. I think what's very strong is comparing and contrasting technologies, for example. I haven't used it yet for the Paradigm, but I'm not averse to, looking and asking and verifying and saying, hey, show me how these are similar or different. If I do that, though, and when I have done that, I always use the deep research component because I want to know the source. Now, this is the thing that has surprised me, which I don't know many practitioners, the buyers know. And by the way, the Combine, the other thing about the Combine is it's really tailored toward them.
Right.
Minor digression. When I was at Forrester, and it's part of the reason why I don't have a 2x2 box, I used to have vendors, present company excluded, who would insist that their only goal with the wave is what it was when I was at Forrester. Their only goal was to beat the other guy. It's like the old joke about two guys in the woods and the bear, and they're running away from the bear, and he turns to the other guy and he says, why are you putting your shoes on? He goes, well, because I don't have to outrun the bear. I just have to outrun you. And I think this is what a lot of vendors think. They fight over 1/100th of a millimeter on and I get it. I get why it's a hyper competitive market. You can brag to your boss, we beat these guys.
Yeah.
I can tell you 100% authority, less than 10% of the practitioners I talk to care about that at all. They care about the leader category, but they don't care if you beat another guy by 1/10 of 1 millimeter on that chart. But you will be shocked how many vendors fight for that. And that's why I think the Combine's different, because there is no 2x2 box. You're not fighting over 1/10 of a millimeter. Now you can fight over metals, and they do that. But I say, look, you're not competing against everybody else here. I don't really have aggregate views of these things. I do everybody in isolation. Now they can go and compare these things, but mine are absolute, not relative, which is what I find the vendors care a lot more about.
I agree.
So,
yeah. From a vendor perspective, I think you want to get you want to be able to shine in the areas that you're very, very strong in. And from our perspective, we will always say we want to keep improving year on year in the areas that we know we need some work to do, right? I think to look back, it provides a great perspective to say, okay, here's where we started, let's say in 18 or 19, but in the last 5 or 6 years, this is the kind of progress that we've made. I think it tells a more compelling story. To me, when I'm in front of customers, I'm always talking about, this is not a static thing. Like a company and a product and a platform is not a static thing. We're making releases every month. Like it is a living, breathing thing. So you're going to have a physical every year from the combines of the world, but that is a point in time, and you're going to keep working on the things that you want to keep building on and doubling down on the areas that you're really, really strong at. So I do agree. I think that practitioners obviously care about what's happening in the vendors landscape, but I think they also care a lot about how, what's the underlying leadership team and the management team and the philosophy that a company is following to make improvements over time, because that's the kind of partner that anyone would want to be with.
Well, you asked a question earlier about how AI is going to change the research space. I'm not sure I answered that. Do you want me to take 2 minutes and answer that?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So, like I said, I think it's smart but not wise, and I don't think it gets at the critical information about how are people actually implementing a technology in a real environment. It can compare and contrast, in theory, what these features and functionalities are like, and that's important. Although I would caution against one thing. When I have done this, that's why I do the deep research component. When I've done this before, sometimes the deep research, you want to know what the source of this information is? Vendor sites.
Yeah.
And so if you're a practitioner and you're seeing a chart that shows you strengths and weaknesses, and you click on that and find out what the source is, and it's all the vendors in the industry telling you what they're good at, that's not necessarily useful. So I always encourage people, do the deep research part. Don't just trust it to the cursory review that you get on ChatGPT. That said, sometimes the deep research stuff is cited from third parties and legitimate, unbiased sources. It doesn't have my information in there, funny enough, even though my stuff is available, but which I think is part of the game. It's almost like SEO. There's like AEO or GEO where you have to compete to get people. So it's a mystery. Why would they source certain things, not others? I played around with it a bit, and I think it has to learn reputation a bit more. So I do think there's value in using it. It can't tell you how it's going to be implemented, and it can't tell you what people's impressions are. That's not aggregated anywhere. That's why I do those 80 to 100 phone calls, because the only way you're ever going to hear how a particular technology actually works in an actual environment is to talk to actual users in that actual environment. That all said, I do think that the research space is in for a wholesale change, because any industry where there's a billable hour or a pyramid component where you've got people at the top who have the knowledge and the people at the bottom who do the work is going to be radically transformed, because it's the bottom part here.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of these companies that have published research that frankly isn't that useful. They are using people on a partial billable hour component that aren't really that good.
Yeah.
And I think this kind of technology makes the strong, more productive people stronger and more productive. And it exposes the fallacy that just because you work for a company and you have a title doesn't necessarily mean you're adding a lot of value. So the law firms are going to grapple with this. Management consulting firms are grappling this. And so are the research firms, because there are a lot of junior people at research firms who are there to learn, and that's great. But are you, as a client, do you really want to pay for the other company's people to learn, or are you paying for value? And I think that's where this is getting exposed.
Yeah, completely agree. And I think I was just about to make that comment that, I think where sort of firms like yours, where you're laser focused in a particular segment and are doing a ton of work, like making all these calls and talking to people, that's hard to replicate, right? Because you're going to pick up on nuances and the pauses and the body language. Even if it's virtual meetings, you're going to pick up on those things. And I think that makes us more human, right? I think we lean in more into the human part of it, the wisdom part of it, where we can touch on things that I don't think machines are ever going to be able to do. That they're going to get better and better and better, but I think there's the domain of that human connection and having conversations. I think that's where it's at. And yeah, I don't think that gets replaced. And that wisdom piece is critical.
I do think one other thing I'm going to mention quickly too is I do think, in addition to that fundamental shift that I think we're going to see in every industry, research space included, there's an evolution that these companies have to sort of take on that they haven't to date. The wave, the magic quadrant, the MarketScape, they've all been the same for how long? 20, 30 years, maybe in some cases. 2x2 box, PDF, static. I don't believe that's the future of evaluations for a lot of reasons. And I put my money where my mouth is because I created something called the eCombine,
Yep.
which is an interactive version of my Combine. So I publish a static PDF. Again, it uses metals as in the Combine as opposed to a 2x2 box, which again, there's always going to be value in a snapshot, but the e-combine is interactive. So a buyer can go in, select the various things that are priority to him or her, and then get, based on my research, a recommendation for a platform that matches the particular criteria they're looking for. And I launched it last week and actually to rave reviews. I'm very proud of what happened. But one of the questions that was pointed out is like, why hasn't Gartner or Forrester or IDC done something like this? Now, they have like a spreadsheet you can manipulate some things around, but nothing public facing
Yeah.
and nothing that's available to the world. I don't charge anybody for the e-combine. I'm making it available to the world. And my only answer is that it's the innovator's dilemma. They have so much invested in the existing metaphor with the reprints, et cetera, that they will never self-disrupt. They will never self-cannibalize. And so I'm like, I'm happy to do that. To me, the two can work side by side. The big difference is, yes, I have a snapshot every year, which I think is important, but through the year, you guys don't just do one release a year and call it a day. People change, processes change, technologies are updated, things are deprecated. So what I'm hoping here is through the year, I'm going to use the e-combine to be constantly updating so that when a buyer looks at it in 5, 6, 8 months, they're going to get a different result than the one that I just did. Because look at ChatGPT is exactly 3 years old as of next month. 3. So what has happened in the last year? Haven't there been multiple releases of ChatGPT, like 4.0, 5.0, et cetera?
Yep.
Perplexity. The world's moving too quickly, I guess, to say that you can just take a snapshot once a year and call it golden. I don't think you can. There's a lot of value in it because you have to stop every moment and, assess. But there's too much changing for it to be the authoritative source on where things are in an updated fashion.
That is fascinating, and let me be the first to say, if we can connect our roadmap and our shipping schedule and our release schedule and connect it to what you're doing, man, wouldn't that be amazing if there's a living document that says, yeah, they didn't have this thing 3 months ago, but that just got shipped today, or yes, they have this, and there's an even better sort of AI agentic release coming 6 weeks from now. I mean, that would be utopian if a practitioner could go in and say, here's 17 roadmaps from 17 vendors, and it's all getting combined, and it's real, and it's in real time. I mean, I'm I'm I'm,
Real
I'm
time's ambition. But
but
in a
that's
year, I mean, how many things has Unilog done in the last
oh,
year? If you
oh
just took a snapshot from 1 year ago, I mean, I know companies that have
yeah,
acquired 2 or 3 major pieces of technology
yep,
that are not in the very latest version of anything because the snapshot was done a year ago. I mean, I
yeah,
hate to mention a competitor, but like Salesforce has acquired multiple companies. They always do. But Salesforce has acquired multiple companies, which is why the snapshot of them last year is going to look very different from the next year. And if you're
correct.
buying in the middle of the cycle, then what are you actually evaluating? Last year's version, which is no longer relevant, or next year's version, which hasn't come out yet? So to me, this is a way for me to peg it and to market according to the market and where it is. And again, well, that just makes sense to me. I don't know why other people aren't doing that.
Yeah, and you were just mentioning synonyms and search. Like, we were doing synonyms a particular way when we participated in the combine. And last 2 weeks ago, we released an agent for synonyms. Like, it's all agentic now. And so it's like, it is mind blowing the pace at which things are moving, the speed at which our product management team, as well as I'm sure others in the space, are doing releases. So it's a very rapidly evolving space. And sure, there's an annual sort of review that's needed, but this is a living, breathing platform, and it changes every week, every month. It's a great segue, I think, to sort of the next couple of topics I wanted to cover, Andy. What was the big learning from this year's exercise? What were the thing that surprised you? Is there anything that surprised you? You've been doing this for a while, but as we sit here in 2025, what was anything that surprised you in this year's process?
Yeah, I think, well, one is the hype around AI. I mean, there's hype everywhere. There's also some reality around it, but kind of weeding through that and cutting through the noise to get to the signal around that. My conclusion is that AI has not yet arrived in the platform space, and it certainly hasn't arrived in lockstep with the rhetoric around it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think AI has been overhyped. Largely, there are some pockets of exception. Uh, I also don't believe that the customers, the buyers, uh, understand the potential that a lot of platforms have. So they're leaving functionality on the table at a much higher degree than they were before, mostly because some of that AI, like I said, is real. And if they're not using that functionality, they're not only not using the functionality from before, they're not using this really powerful functionality now. So you said, I haven't evaluated this, but as an example, you mentioned agentic synonym creation, right? In the past, you had to ask people for words, they had to manually create the synonym dictionary. And then some people automated parts of that with some suggestions. Now, with agentic, I gather, because I've seen this on the search side, now you can ask for words and it can create a whole library of synonyms based on what's available elsewhere, probably rank the relevance, etc. So if you're not doing synonyms at all, or you're still doing it manually, not only are you not using an automated one, but you're not using a very powerful AI version of it too. And so I think there's also a dimension of companies have to do a better job of explaining to their customers about how they can be using the technology to do a lot more than they're doing right now. Because a lot of them look at it as though they say, I hear things like, we don't have the budget to buy new things. We want to enhance our existing capability, and we're going to go buy a module from some other company to do that. And sometimes I say, if you actually talk to your existing company, if you explored that that's not available right now through your existing platform, and sometimes it actually is. They were going to go buy something else. And after talking to me, they went back to the vendor and discovered that what
They
was
had
offered they had was actually close enough to being exactly what they wanted that they saved a ton of money. Plus, it's already there. And it's a win-win-win. They love it. You love it.
yeah.
Everybody loves it. It's an ignorance premium that I feel like they're being charged because they don't even know what they have right in front of them. So that's one area. Another area I would say is that, like it or hate it, there is a Shopify effect going on.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not new. It's been here for a while. It happened on the B2C side for sure. And it's not creeping into the B2B side, where Shopify's model, which is a more templated model, I think almost as a reaction or perhaps an overreaction to the composable approach, where everything is sort of built by the team. Shopify, the Shopify model is you don't need to build all that stuff. You can get 85% of the way there with these templates. And by the way, we're a lot less expensive. So it's really two components: a templatized approach, which is, I think, the modern version of a monolith or an all in one. They hate that I would say that, but it kind of
Yeah.
is. And a less expensive. So there's always been downward pressure on pricing for the platforms. But I say it's a Shopify effect because I'm not sure it's actually Shopify. I believe it's the effect of Shopify. And I think even platforms like yours and others can actually lean into the Shopify effect to your own advantage. So I think there's a pricing dimension here. And I think the last thing I would say is that I just don't find a bunch of companies, and there's some exceptions here, who want to rip and replace an entire platform. And the reason why is because of not the price necessarily, it's the effort. It just takes too damn long. And there's so much that's mission critical that they can't just say, we're going to take this one out and put this one in. I think those days, I wouldn't say they're over, but they're diminishing. I think it's now about finding the best stuff. If it's templated or composable, that's a decision. Putting these things together and making it easy to take things out and replace things in pieces, either with an existing platform, like we just talked about, by adding that functionality, finding a best of breed, or perhaps in some cases building it yourself. But this idea of ripping and replacing an entire platform, nobody's got the time or the budget, or frankly, the appetite for that.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I certainly think that there's a value conversation to be had on both ends of the spectrum, whether it's the low end templated model or the fully composable, you know, very complex model. I think where we feel strongly is B2B is different in HVAC, it's different in PVF, it's different in electrical, it's different in industrial, it's different in pharma. Processes are different, buyer behavior is different. And what we found, I don't know if I think I remember joking about this with you, like pre-composed compose. Like it's like taking all the benefits of composable, but like giving an HVAC company a starter pack that is solely focused in their industry verticals with all of those integrations that they need, all of the functionality that goes into buying a carrier or a train or an American Standard piece of equipment versus a pharma company that needs DEA approvals and completely different workflows, etc. So it's sort of, I think, you either pick the industry focus that you want to have, like, be a provider of value to certain industry segments. And there's significant growth to be had in, let's say, 5 or 6 industry segments and be a very solid player there, or be a generalist and do a lot of different things. And either, my personal opinion, though, I think if price becomes the product, then it becomes challenging, right? I think pricing is really more sort of a value conversation to be had in terms of, okay, what are the things that you need, and here are different levers we can pull and push to get you to the price point that you need to be. But very valid points, Andy. I think this year we're seeing so much change in the landscape as well, with a lot of M&A and a lot of other activity in the vendor community. So trying to wrap this up, last couple of questions, and then would love to sort of get your thoughts on where the future is. But how do you see sort of product data and content playing in with e-commerce? I think we've been in the space, like, through different transformations that Unilog has had. We've seen this continuous thirst for product data and content. You and I have talked about it for many years. Like, that's something that seemingly practitioners tend to realize later in the game, that, oh, this is a great storefront, but it's an empty digital shelf. Like, I need really good product data and content. Are you seeing anything in that space that's been interesting, or anything you'd like to share with the audience in terms of how you're looking at product content, sort of connected it with commerce?
Well, I've been a big fan of data for a long time, and I think it is not been well handled by companies, and therefore not well served by vendors. But I would point to, again, I hate to cite an example of a competitor here, but Salesforce bought Informatica,
Right.
and that was, I think, a turning point for the industry. And I think it's fair to say, my interpretation, not theirs, they've never shared this publicly. They may never share this publicly, but I think by buying Informatica and a little bit of what I know about sort of their data cloud success and the fact that it's tied into their e-commerce operations, I personally think that this is a step in the direction of Salesforce establishing itself as a data company. And the tools for commerce and marketing and everything else that they have are going to become secondary. I think they realized that there was a deficiency here and that whoever controls the data is going to win. And Salesforce, I think, realized that they had the periphery, they didn't have the core. They bought Informatica, which excels at organizing data. It's a PIM, and I think that wasn't an accident. And I think you're going to see other companies moving in this path, joining up with PIM companies, potentially MDM companies, DAM companies. I think this is a marriage that needs to be made. Now, it's interesting. You guys are a little bit ahead of the curve on this one because you've been doing this for a while. In fact, you and I have had the debate over whether you're an e-commerce company or a PIM company or a data enrichment company. But, do you focus on commerce or content? I think it depends. I think we could be looking at a commoditization of commerce. We are not going to be looking at a commoditization of content anytime soon. So if you had to pick, it might make sense to focus more on the data side of things because, to put it very sort of flippantly, you can always get a shopping cart. But if your data is a mess, you can't do anything with it.
And that's what practitioners need to hear sometimes too. But any day, by the way, any day that Salesforce is taking a leaf from our playbook, I'm good with that. But we've been in that PIM and content and commerce space. Our PIM and content came before the commerce platform did, so which is really interesting to see that trend is sort of catching on now. And I see a lot of e-commerce and PIM companies coming together, and obviously that's a good competitive option to what we do, which has always been connected product content and commerce. That's been our go-to. But I think that's for us. We always looked at after having done 450 installs, we found that the product data and content ends up being the longest pole in the tent, right? You can build a storefront, you can get it all done 3 to 4 months, and then you're looking at empty digital shelves where there's no images, there's no attribute information, search is clunky. No matter how good the search platform is, it's clunky because the underlying data isn't there. And so that's a problem we dealt with much early on, and we said our go-to-market's always going to be this notion that it's connected product content and commerce, which is great for mid-market companies. Again, it's not having multiple vendors trying to put a solution together. All right, so Andy, last thoughts on where do you think we will be in 2 to 3 years? B2B digital commerce. What's your crystal ball telling you?
I'd say there are two sides of this. There's the buy side and the sell side. On the buy side, I think the demands will continue to increase. They're going to expect more for less. This is the way things go. They're going to expect more innovation. They're not going to tolerate companies that say that's not a roadmap for, the next year. Because as we talked about earlier, the space is moving so quickly that you can't say, yeah, we'll deliver that in 18 months. 18 months is going to feel like a lifetime in technology. So it's going to put pressure on companies to really deliver stuff in a more expeditious way. But I think the practitioner side, more for less, more functionality. They're not going to wait. And I think there's going to be a lot more integration on the buy side. There's some required integration with the answer engines, which is a great unknown at this point. How do you get, are buyers going to use, meaning their customers, are the end users going to be actively using ChatGPT and other answer engines, even Google Gemini, such that you get the zero-click environment where they just say something like, I need this kind of filter in the HVAC environment. Let's say it's a Chuck in the truck. He says, I need this kind of filter, and he asks ChatGPT about it. ChatGPT says, well, based on my research, this is the filter you're looking for. It goes, oh, yeah, that's the one. What happens next?
Yeah.
Does it go through to his existing procurement system? Does it present Amazon? Does OpenAI have an agreement with a couple of commerce tools like Shopify has talked about this, where they just add it to a cart? What happens? It's going to be the battle for the the front of, people call it the glass. It's going to be a battle for somebody's attention. It's going to be a battle for behavioral supremacy, I guess. That on the buy side, that's going to be the big issue. And I think that's happening faster than most people realize. And then because of that, on the sell side, it's going to really require the vendors to up their game. I think there are too many vendors in the space. I think we're going to see consolidation. I think PE firms are going to pick through the people and the functionality that matters and probably combine some companies together. I did note that the other day, Pros, the pricing company, was being taken private. I think that's a canary in the coal mine because that's a public company that was doing okay, but kind of going sideways. And the PE firm came in and said, "We see opportunity here. We're going to take you private, fix you up, and then get you ready." I don't know why that model doesn't apply to a dozen or more e-commerce platform companies that I follow out of, say, the 25 I'm seeing right now. So there's going to be a lot of change in the next 2 to 3 years. I don't think if we're having this conversation in 2028 that we'll be talking about the same vendors. We won't be talking about the same behavior. And we could be talking about a lot more about zero-click purchases. And we might talk about companies not even having websites.
I could not agree more. Some of the work that we're doing right now in Stealth is all about how we can figure out to be participating and helping our customers participate in that zero-click buy workflow.
But one thing we will still be talking about, though, is bad data. So you can count on that one.
Yeah, that might still be the case. Yes. Well, Andy, thank you so much for sharing your insights and for giving us a closer look at the work that you do at Paradigm and the Combine, and now the eCombine. Certainly very clear to me that the work that you're doing is helping the markets that we are most passionate about, the mid-market, distributors, manufacturers, specialty retailers. And I also think it helps technology providers like ourselves to be better and to understand what it takes to succeed in today's sort of commerce landscape. We're so proud to be part of this conversation, committed to delivering solutions that help our end markets. For anyone that's looking to get a copy of the B2B Combine, you can obviously go to Andy's Paradigm B2B website. You can come to the Unilog Corp website as well. That's where you can find the Combine. If you need to reach out, Andy, do you want to leave your contact information? What's the best way to reach out to you if someone wanted to?
Yeah, you can go to the website and reach me there, or you can reach me on LinkedIn. Those are the two best ways to get me.
Perfect. Same here. Visit us at unilogcorp.com or reach out to us on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to connect. Once again, Andy, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.